Next, we're going to San Diego and we're going to Bob Schultz.
Yeah. Good
Hey,
morning,
Bob.
and thanks, Scott and Jeff, for this session. Jeff, you brought up the issue of blowing up a number
Yes.
of times, and
Yes.
can you? I'd like to have you explore that a little bit more. I mean, we can all of us know what that is physically a little bit when you've overtrained and whatnot, but what about the mental psychological aspects of it, and also the idea of restraint, which you brought up, which I think is great. How has your view of that changed? I mean, we're about the same age, and my view of restraint is different now than it was when I was a young man of 40.
Yeah. Well, scar tissue
Yeah,
changes how we view things, of course.
yeah. So how has your vision of restraint changed, and how do you translate some of that to a young great athlete in their 20s or 30s who don't even understand the concept?
Well, I think you have to introduce that as early as possible, really in your early teens, ideally, because when you know everything when you're 16, to 35, there's generally no conversation because people aren't going to listen no matter what you do. They just think, because they can think it, that it's real. And that's one of the biggest risks I see in the early 30s, is that people have a little bit of wind at their back and they just think that they're infallible. So they go out and they do some things that are reckless, but they don't know that because they don't have any reference points to measure the risks against. So they end up either, again, catastrophic relationship failure, a health event, or financial ruin. And in my opinion, all those are preventable. There just needs to be an early conversation. So like I told my daughter, I said, her name is Ken, K-I-N. I said, Ken, I need to talk to you for a second here. And you're not going to understand what I'm saying, but I kind of want to set the stage for later. And I'm not giving you a lecture. I'm not telling you what to do. And so I can tell her anything to set the stage about some of the risks that she will encounter in the future. And I talk to her about what some of the warning signs of that are. So when those show up, she comes to me and she says, Dad, some of the things that we talked about are now here. I said, great, you've come for the right reason. Let's now talk about what that means. And you look at Lance and you look at Tiger, two people that I've worked with. They both have black eyes for different reasons. And a lot of those, I bet there was never a conversation about some of the risks that we will be faced with later until we get there. And I just feel like there has to be an early conversation. And unfortunately, most people, once the white flag goes up, because they now find themselves in the mental hospital in a certain metaphorical sense, because they've exhausted themselves and they've tried to do it their way, and they realize that it doesn't work. Now they're open to sound counsel. And I do feel like restraint is the hardest thing to do ever, but it's also simultaneously the most important. And I care enough about the people that I work with to tell them the truth, not in a lecture sense, but we're calling out the context of what this means with where we are against our ambitions. We talk about what the fallacy is against the reality. And then we chart a path forward to make sure that we have the best opportunity to avoid the preventable problems and seize the probable opportunities that are around the corner. And I'm fastidious about this, that nobody gets any slack for this. And, because of my age and because of where I've been, I could peek around the corner and see what's coming. And so I really feel that we need to be an advocate for other people's vulnerability, because our human nature is not necessarily our friend. It prompts us to do things that may seem right, but they end up not being right. I think all of us have had a boyfriend or a girlfriend where we thought it was the best thing ever. And then 1 week later, we were saying to ourselves, man, what was I thinking? Well, that's a good question. What was I thinking? And why was I thinking that? And so we can extrapolate that to our life taken as a whole. And that's the reason why I think we need sound counsel in our corner. Like, look, how did Rocky become Rocky? He had the raw substrate, but he had Mickey in his corner. He had the old guy. Mickey look, anybody that doesn't walk with a limp or have a missing ear or, their nose on the side of their face or a missing discolored teeth, I don't trust them, because they haven't been in the game enough to know what they're talking about. And so Rocky did it because he had Mickey, who in real time was watching him in the ring while he was slugging it out like we all do day in and day out. And Mickey saw what had to go right, and he relayed to Rocky what he needed to do to win the round to become the perennial champion of the world. And I do feel like we have three types of advisors. You have your coaches, like Bono had a voice coach. He needs a voice coach. But the voice coach doesn't know anything about the rest of his life. It's more likely that what's happening in the rest of his life is going to mess with his voice rather than the voice coach's recommendation. and mentors are important as well. They're essential. But again, they maybe see half your life, but what about the other half? So who's there, like, watching everything that you're doing in real time, like Mickey was doing? There needs to be this sagely individual that has enough life experience to be able to share with you the reality of what you're thinking. And that's what the champions all have, that I was alluding to when I was answering Scott's question. They know it to be true because there's a body of evidence that tells us that it's true. And the more that you can avoid the preventable problems, the better it's going to be. So that would be the thing that I would say. Like, who's your corner man? Who are you talking to that is showing you what's coming that you don't know about? Because none of us can outrun our blind spots. Blind spots are expensive, So that's the way that I would answer that, Bob. It's never too early to have the conversation.
Great advice. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Great question. Thank you.